I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays. I know we haven't done one in a while, but we're trying to get back into a routine and get these shows out to you, if not on Monday, at least at the beginning of the week. We've got a lot of other stuff going on. We've got some reviews coming up to include the Remington 700 long range and 300 Win Mag, and some optics reviews. We've got two Nightforce ATAC Rs on deck that we are finishing up, and hopefully we will get you some stuff out on some intermediate cost optics as well coming really soon. We've got some handgun and some carbine stuff coming up too, so really you guys need to stay tuned. We'll be dropping a lot of reviews here as quick as we can get them done. We've had some work going on in the studio trying to get some things set up. I want to be able to show you some really close detail on them, and we didn't have a really good setup to be able to do that. So hopefully now we've rectified that problem, and I know how to get our camera set up and our lighting set up so we can get you in close and give you really a first-person view of some of the products that we get to work with. I think it will really benefit you guys in the long run. But enough of that, let's get on with the questions. And the first question we have this week comes from Chris. And Chris says, for guys that don't regularly have the opportunity to travel out to medium long range distances due to their area or limited ranges around, what are some good training tools or practices at say 100 yards that they could do practice using their reticles that would mimic distance shooting regarding holdovers and dialing? If any, thanks. Well, Chris, if you're limited to 100 yards, then you really run into some issues if you're trying to practice holdovers. Generally, if you try to come in closer than 100 yards with a 308 rifle, you're going to be doing holdovers, but they're not going to work in any kind of linear fashion that would duplicate what you would be doing downrange at greater than 100 yards. The closer you get into the rifle, the more you'll have to hold. You can do some math with a ballistic calculator to try to figure out what, say, a 50-yard holdover would equate to downrange, but it really becomes unwieldy quickly. What I would recommend doing if you're going to try to practice inside 100 yards and you're going to start trying to practice holdovers, then I would use a reduced size paper target, because if you're trying to do it with a steel target, you'd have to get really small. Reduced size paper target, and I would use a dial under and then hold over to counteract that. Let's say you wanted to mimic, just for the sake of argument, shooting at 200 yards with a 308. Well, then you would dial under 0.4, and then you would use your reticle to hold over 0.4, and that would give you a rough mill trajectory for a 200-yard holdover. So if you did the math and reduced your target to equate say a 1 MOA target at 200 yards, then you would hold over 0.4 with a 0.4 dial under, and it would give you a rough approximation looking through your scope of what you would see at 200 yards. Really, I don't think you're going to get a great training benefit from that unless you're just trying to get into the habit of seeing that sight picture. And I think for that, you would get a whole lot more use of just dry firing at different ranges with different holdovers than actually trying to live fire under 100 yards doing that. What I think you could get more use of practicing at 100 yards are things like rapid bolt manipulation and working on different positions, unsteady position shooting, barricade shooting, that kind of thing. Getting a barricade out, even at 100 yards, if you reduce your targets down to MOA or smaller, it's going to be very, very challenging at 100 yards. If you're hitting sub-MOA targets off a barricade, even at 100 yards, you're doing really, really well. But if you stick out 1.5, 2-inch dots at 100 yards and just routinely stack rounds into them from a barricade, you're getting a good deal of training value, especially if you're working on getting that rear bag support, getting into position quickly, and getting those shots off rapidly. You can get a lot of training value at the close range doing that. Now, if you're on a range that doesn't allow you to set a barricade out forward of the firing line, or you've got a built-up firing line, or you've got some strange rules where you have to shoot from a bench, you can kind of cheat it a little bit. A lot of times they require you to shoot from a bench, but they may not require you to be sitting in a chair while you're shooting from a bench. So if that's the case, then you can stack different things on your bench to get different heights set up, and you can support the front of the rifle on the bench, but go with a support bag or just body position to support the rear of the rifle. Then again, you're getting training value, holding that rifle on, driving it through recoil, running the bolt without totally losing sight of your target. All those things are things that you can work on time and time again. No matter what your distance to the target is, you can work on keeping your face planted on that comb, keeping your sight picture while you cycle the bolt and get that next cartridge in, and you can practice driving the rifle through recoil to try to maintain that sight picture and be able to see your bullet impact the target. Those are all things you can work on no matter what distance you have access to. Our next question comes from Justin, and Justin asks, for us shooters that are new to PRS, we have multiple projects going on and it's hard to budget for everything. Do you prefer to buy less expensive scopes like the Vortex Viper PST, Leupold Mark IV, Burris XTR rifle scopes to save on budget for each project, or buy a Nightforce NXS or ATAC-R and run it on multiple rifles? Well, Justin, that really is kind of a difficult question because a lot of it is going to depend upon what you prefer to do. If you have one rifle that is really your main rifle, that's your competition rifle, that's what you want to shoot in PRS, say for instance you're going to shoot in open class, you don't really care about the gas gun class, then I say go for a high-end scope, set that rig up exactly the way you want to shoot it for a match. Then if you have another project, say you're working up another rifle, or you want to play with a different cartridge and see if that will work for you next season, then you can take that scope when you're ready to shoot that rifle, pull it off your primary rifle, drop it onto the alternate rifle, make sure that you record your zero for your primary rifle, get the secondary rifle zeroed in, and then without slipping the turrets or anything, just record the data for that rifle. So you know going from this rifle to that rifle, you'll set the turrets to this position. Then it's very easy to switch between the two. Now if you start throwing a third and a fourth rifle in, it becomes much more complex because you're going to have a different zero offset for every rifle. And you really don't want to get into the point where you're slipping the turrets each time, because then there's a possibility when you go back onto your primary rifle, it's not going to return to zero exactly and you're going to have some issues. Now, quick release bases will make this process easier, but even if you're running something like the Nightforce rings that we have on this rifle, we just have a 1/2-inch nut on the back of here. So if you have something like a torque limiter or a Borka Tools driver, then it's real quick to pop this guy off, and then when I put it back on, load the scope forward, torque them to spec, and then you're going to be pretty close to a perfect zero. You may have to do just a slight tweak, but it's going to be very, very close return to zero. When you get more rifles, again, that becomes more of a pain in the butt. So if you're trying to outfit, 4 or 5 rifles, then you're really going to have to do some soul searching and decide if you want to go to a lower price optic and spread the love, or if you still want to go with that primary, and then how often you shoot the other rifles will depend on how often you switch that scope off and go to something else. For me, I have both high-end scopes and mid-range scopes, and it really depends upon the purpose of the rifle. If it is a competition rifle, very often it will have a higher-end scope on it. If it's just a fun rifle or a rifle that I'm testing something out, or an optic that I keep hanging around to hang on a test rifle, then it may be one of those mid-range optics. We have gotten to the point anymore where the mid-range optics, the quality has gotten so good on them that you're really not limited in competition when you're shooting a mid-range optic. The thing that the higher end optics give you is that confidence that you know everything is working right on it. It gives you a little bit better glass clarity. Things like the tactile clicks on it are a little bit more precise. And of course you get things like this scope in front of me, the ATAC-R, is made in the USA. Whereas some of the mid-range scopes, actually most of the mid-range scopes, are made in China or various different Asian countries where the manufacturing costs are a little bit lower. So there is a difference going from mid-range to top-end scope, but the question on if that difference is really going to have an impact on your score when you're shooting matches, that's questionable and will depend upon what your skill level is at. So there really isn't a right or wrong answer. I hope I give you a little bit of insight, but I can't say you should do this or you should do that. So that's about the closest I can come to an answer on that. My next question is from Jason, and Jason asks, for all-day matches which start with a long hike that makes going back to the truck impractical, what did you carry for food, gear? Think about not knowing what the stages are before you start. Well, Jason, I've covered a couple of different things that I carry when I go to matches like that. So check back through our previous videos and you'll see some of the my match gear videos or what I've carried for specific matches. If it's something where I have no idea what the stages are gonna hold, then I'm gonna carry a variety of support bags, rear bags, and then the arm bags. I'm gonna carry rain gear depending upon what the forecast is and where it is I'm shooting. If I'm shooting somewhere out west where the weather is pretty stable, meaning storms don't just blow in, then I'll look at the forecast, and if rain's not forecasted, I probably won't actually pack rain gear. But if there's any possibility of rain at all, then I'll pack rain gear. That's one of those things that just makes it a little bit nicer when you're standing in line waiting to shoot. I don't generally care if I get wet when I'm shooting, but when you're just standing there in a downpour waiting for your turn, especially if it's a little bit chilly, it can make things really miserable. Always carry water if they're not providing it for you at the different stages, and even if they are providing it for you at the different stages, make sure you carry a bottle or two between, because I've been to matches before where I expected to have water at the next stage and you get there and they're all out of water and it's an hour or two before they can get around with the gator to resupply water. So it's a good idea to keep a decent amount on hand and take it with you from stage to stage. As far as food, I don't usually carry anything big on food. It'll be meal replacement bars or Cliff bars or something to snack on, maybe some beef jerky. I almost always carry gum with me. That's just my thing. I don't smoke, I don't chew, but I chew gum quite a bit. So I'll keep some gum in my bag. Shooting gear, regardless of if I have to walk to the stages or if I can go back to the vehicle between stages, is pretty much the same as far as my laser rangefinder, my Kestrel, that kind of stuff. And again, we've done quite a few videos on that. But one of the key pieces that I usually need some intel on the stages before I decide to drag you out is a shooting tripod and a saddle type rest. If I know it's going to be a field type match where there's going to be a lot of kneeling, maybe some standing, quite a bit of unimproved obstacles or rolling terrain I have to shoot over, then I'm probably going to go ahead and strap a tripod to my backpack. If there's not going to be any of that, then I'll leave the tripod behind. There have been occasions where I've left the tripod behind and thought, I really could have used it on that. There's also a product out there that we are working with right now called rifle sticks, which are basically bipod extensions for either the Harris bipods or the Atlas bipods that are really lightweight. I can throw them in my bag and pretty much forget about them. But if I run into one of those stages where I need to do a high kneeling position, then I can go ahead and utilize something like that and shoot over grass or shoot over brush. So things like that are something that you kind of need to do a little bit of snooping and pooping, a little bit of intel on the match before you go to see if you need to drag that stuff out. I don't really want to drag a full tripod rig out with me if I don't need it, because it's just a pain, especially if you're going to be walking a couple of miles over the course of the match. That's about it for what I drag with me though. Weather is going to dictate a lot of what goes in my bag, but you'll have to kind of make that choice on your own as you roll into the match. And our last question comes from Daniel, and Daniel asks, I'm building a budget sniper rifle based on one you built a year or so back, a Remington 700 Magpul Hunter chassis. I have on order a Vortex Viper PST Gen 2 scope. I previously bought a Nightforce direct mount for my scope, 20 MOA. At the time I was thinking that I was going to buy a Nightforce scope. Although I understand tight tolerances, should I look for a Vortex mounting option? Just feel that the fit might be better with a matched brand. Well, Daniel, since you already have the Unimount and a 20 MOA Unimount is good to go, I would go ahead and stick with that Unimount unless you get it on there and actually find a fit problem where the objective bell is interfering with the barrel or something of that nature. As far as tolerances, I don't think you really have to worry about tolerances between Vortex rings or Night Force rings. The Night Force Unimount is a very high quality mount. So it's really, I think, going to work just fine for you. The only thing that you'll run into with a Unimount where the rings bolt directly to the receiver is you may be limited in that forward to back movement to get your eye relief lined out. Now, luckily, with going with the Magpul 700, you do have the ability to add spacers to be able to adjust your length of pull to get your face in the right position to fix that eye relief. Now, it's kind of going about things backwards. I usually like to have the length of pull set and then go and set where the scope is sitting at. But the opposite direction will work if you're limited on how forward or how far back you can adjust that scope. So I would go ahead and keep the Unimount. I wouldn't try to sell it and then go with Vortex rings and base. I don't think you're going to gain anything by going with the Vortex pieces over the current Night Force piece that you already have. Now, if you didn't have that Unimount, I might say go ahead and just order the Vortex rings. If you go for their higher end rings, those are, I believe, still made by Sequence Precision. So they are a very high quality set of rings, and you won't have any problems with those either. So that is my advice for you on that. Well, that's it for the questions for our show. Thank you guys for sending the questions in. If you guys have any questions that you would like to have answered on the show or questions over anything that I just discussed, please leave them in the comments section below, and we will take a look at those comments for possible inclusion in the next Mail Call Mondays. If you got a question about anything precision rifle related, you can leave it in the comments below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you guys have liked this video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot.